Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Exactly a decade ago, Beijing hosted the 2008 Olympic Games. The grand event dazzled the world and the people here in China. China topped the medal table also for the very first time ever. Since then, there has been a huge growth in the number of people in China getting involved in sporting activities as the legacy of the Beijing Summer Olympic Games lives on. Before we get down to the discussion about what happened then and what's the legacy of the Beijing Olympic Games, take a look at this first.
Exhibitions, light shows, and various activities in remembrance of the day 10 years ago. On August 8, 2008, a row of 29 fireworks, which represented the 29th edition of the modern Olympics, were set off to mark the start of the Beijing Games. The spectacle-filled opening ceremony was regarded as one of the most beautiful in the event's history, as it celebrated 5,000 years of traditional Chinese culture. Spectators and the international media touted the ceremony as spectacular and spellbinding, and by many accounts, the greatest ever in the history of the Olympics. Today, the night that launched 1,000 games is a fond memory for Chinese citizens and international Olympic enthusiasts the world over.
We will always remember the fantastic opening ceremony which amazed the world with the rich and profound culture of China.
The Olympic spirit has had impacts on our attitudes towards life, and the facilities built for the 2008 Games also laid the foundation for national fitness programs.
China won its first gold medal at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. In 2001, Beijing won the Olympic bid for the first time in history, and in 2008, the Chinese team went away with 51 golds, becoming the first Asian country to finish at the top of the medal table. 204 countries and regions took part in the Beijing Olympics, while 43 new world and 132 new Olympic records were set. It's not just all about the games. The idea of keeping fit has taken root among Chinese citizens, making it one of the Olympic legacies. In remembrance of China's Olympic debut, the Chinese National Fitness Day began on August 8 in 2009. The 2008 Games also left a massive legacy for the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. They are set to use 11 venues and stadiums, which were used 10 years ago. The Chinese capital also becomes the first city to host both the Summer and Winter Olympics, another one for the books.
For more discussion on the 10th anniversary of the Beijing Summer Olympic Games, in our Beijing studio, we have Paul Dong, who's a cultural communicator, who's also the CEO of iChina Limited, but certainly one who volunteered for the Beijing Olympic Games 10 years ago.
One who used to work with you, almost every evening.
Yes, exactly. And also sitting here in our Beijing studio, an economist coming from China, Liu Baocheng, Professor Liu Baocheng, welcome as well. Also joining us in London, in the UK, Simon Pusey, a sports commentator and also a broadcaster. Certainly, we work together, shoulder by shoulder, for the Beijing Olympic Games as well, Simon. Good to see you, all of you. 10 years on. I remember, gentlemen, I'm sure you did too, the vivid pictures of Michael Phelps, 8 gold Beijing Summer Olympic Games. Usain Bolt making his first try internationally on the Olympic stage. Those memorable moments. Where were you? Where were you?
But Tian Wei, very honestly, I only remember those numbers. I don't have vivid memory of their pictures because I had to work, concentrate on beach volleyball at our broadcast in the studio. And so I only caught the news from hearing from other people.
So how about that, working on the beach volleyball? Did you enjoy it, every minute of it?
Well, it was very exhaustive and also exciting, and because beach volleyball, based on the rule, cannot stop, whatever the weather condition was. And so Beijing had torrential rains during those days. And so we had to dig the tunnel and to let the water out of the beach so that the game will continue. And also during the intervals, so we jumped into the center of the beach court, trying to arouse the excitement of the relatively quiet Chinese audience.
At that time, you worked for Beijing's Olympic
I was on
Games,
BOCA, the Olympic organizing committee.
Yes, exactly. Those are memorable moments. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah,
unforgettable throughout, exactly, for a lifetime. What about for you, Professor Liu? I'm sure you were not just calmly as an economist watching the TV and the opening ceremony.
Oh, well, yes. Actually, I lived very close to the stadium, so I could really
stand. Nest.
Yeah, to the bird's nest. I could really stand on the roof of the building to watch the whole thing without buying the tickets, though. So, and also I was supporting a number of volunteers, from middle school to universities. Yes. And that was really exciting moment. But it's not only the event per se, but the whole atmosphere and the event that drives the infrastructure construction and the spirit of voluntarity. So that is something more exciting.
Simon, I have to call on your name now. I mean, where were you during the Beijing Olympic Games? I know you were working, but tell me exactly what happened around you during those days. Unforgettable 3 weeks.
Yeah, I was working for a channel in the UK, and your last speaker's so right. Just the whole atmosphere changes, doesn't it, when there's an Olympics on, especially if it's in the host city where you are. So the moments I remember was obviously the Bird's Nest Stadium, the opening ceremony, $100 million supposedly spent on that, and those incredible fireworks. And then also Usain Bolt. Many people hadn't heard of him before, and then he bursts onto the scene and he breaks the world record. So incredible memories from Beijing. And you said Phelps as well. There's so many different stories and people, and it is just such an enjoyable time, and I think Beijing did such a good job during it.
Exceptional. That's the word being used, isn't it? I remember so clearly coming from the president of the Olympic Committee. Exactly. But, things have changed. But when you look at what happened before the Beijing Olympic Games, there were a lot of things going on. Doubts about China, its capabilities, its potential, and the ego behind why China wants to host this Beijing Olympic Games.
Air quality also.
Controversies, right? When the torch was being spread around the world, obviously China wanted to have quite a blast when the torch relay ceremony is going on around the world. Remember those days?
Yeah, I remember that by reading in the news that a Singaporean leader warned the West that it will cause divide among for many generations. That they said the young people in China would never forgive those people who intervened, try to interrupt the torch relay. But actually, the Chinese people are forgetting about this very fast. Yes. But yes. Back then, during those moments, it was very, very difficult for us to accept.
Simon, it was a time when China absolutely in an urgency of world recognition in a way. And also it is a time China came out, some say even that year, 2008, becomes the year zero for China in a way, which is the beginning of something much more than what China used to be. I'm sure, Simon, you remember those debates going on in the UK. The torch relay in the UK was quite an event. What about that then, now when you reflect back?
Yeah, I think there's always, when there's a new host city, there's always going to be debates and is it ready? China had won lots of medals before, but it wasn't really seen as a sporting powerhouse and a place where the Olympics had been before. So I think there's always going to be a few fears and worries. But coming top of the medal table for the first time ever, how you proved that wrong. I think the regeneration of certain areas and would buildings be ready on time and things like that. I think it was quite up to the wire in terms of when things were ready in the end. But yeah, what a spectacle it was. So I think you certainly proved those doubters wrong.
Of course, we remember very well at the closing ceremony of Beijing Summer Olympic Games, the UK also did a great job in giving a preview about the next Summer Olympic Games, of course. But Professor Liu here, what about those doubts? But what about those confirmations eventually? When the opening ceremony happened, it's just a magical moment that everybody knows this is it.
That's right.
And it is it.
Yeah. Actually, for the next entire 2 years, my gift to all my foreign friends was really the CD for the Olympic event, opening ceremony, and together with those beautiful elite performance. So athlete performance, that's something very exciting. That's really proud for China, and this is also a weakening process, or even the epoch-making moment for China, because China was there to have the big dream to earn the recognition from the world, not only in economic terms, but also in the sports, in its art, and also in the management skills. This is a big event that requires very stringent organizational skills.
Yes, you used the word pride, but I guess it's only part of the story. The reason why China eventually was very proud, so is the rest of the world about China as well at the end of the Olympic Games, is that China finally become a part of the world. Just like that, an equal partner.
Exactly.
Not being someone that is different.
Is a second-class
not being
country.
So-called a second class. Not being asking others for so-called exception, but China become part of it, and the rest of the world applauded that. That is the moment that everybody is proud of, not just the pride of nations, but rather something of a bigger something than the nation.
Yeah, just as you quoted the speech Jacques Rogge made at the closing ceremony, and before he used the word exceptional, he also mentioned that those 16 glorious days that we will cherish forever, quote unquote, made China learn about the world better, and the world learn about China better. And it was actually true. I think Ken Wei, to me, I think it's for CGTN, it's something also we learned that by bidding and hosting such a grand event, international event, even those controversies and suspicions ahead of it actually attracted more attention, unprecedented attention on just a few hours being performed inside the bird's nest, that you will pay billions of dollars in your other road shows that would not equal that effect.
So you're saying when the spotlight is on you, do it.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with ABC from Australia, the anchor, right after that.
There are a lot of people coming into China. This is the moment. But having said that, though, Simon, is China still as what it is, or rather what it was 10 years ago, be able to have like this sponge in a way, to be able to absorb as much as possible, as wonderful as possible, the things from around the world, and make sure it is going to be part of China? Simon?
Yeah, well, I think 4 billion people watched the opening ceremony. It's about 2/3 of the world's population. So when you talk about eyes being on your country, they certainly were. I'd say the thing that people need to look at now really is the legacy and the impact, as well as remembering those incredible moments, but also what is the infrastructure being used for now, and also where is the sports now in terms of, China was top in the medal tables then. Will it be able to go better in the future in the next few Olympic Games? But yeah, certainly watching it, it's certainly put lots of Chinese athletes and sports on the map. People who, Sun Yang, you'd never heard of before, you're suddenly watching on TV winning all these medals. So a really great moment for China.
It is a great moment. It's also, I hope, a great moment for the world, because it's supposed to be an occasion that everybody celebrates. It's not just China's moment, but everybody's moment. Having said that, though, what about the reality check? Professor Liu, infrastructure, how well is being used? Meanwhile, after the Beijing Olympic Games, has the economy picked up? Has job opportunities increased? Has equality become much a bigger word in the everyday policy making? Is sport becoming a pillar of the economy and also a pillar of people's everyday life? There are a lot of questions out there, Professor.
Well, as a matter of fact, before the Olympic, I visited a number of stadiums. Actually, they were selling furniture, selling garments in order to make some income, right? So, but after the Olympic, we see that more and more people are there to play badminton, to do the gym, and to do the running, etc. So we are really bringing back the ethos of sports and Olympic. And that's something very important to this nation's spirit. And the other is that the infrastructure is really changing a whole great deal, you know, from on a micro side, from all the street cleaning to the skyline.
That's right.
So that's something.
And some of the iconic buildings as well.
Exactly. And also economically, you know, the structure is set up there to with the more efficient management skills, so economy has really moved up quite a deal, and particularly this is Olympic. After all, it's not only sports but also events that
it's
involve
supposed to be about more than just the sports. But Paul, has China realized its dream as win a bid for the Olympic Games?
Well, it was. I had to admit that it was a second bid from Beijing. Beijing narrowly lost to Sydney. Yes. And yeah, finally, I think China realized this dream and motivated the entire nation to pay attention, embrace this not indigenous Chinese culture is created. Most of the sports were created in the West. But China was opening up, and people are more modern to embrace something Western, and they practice starting from the moment they hosted the Olympic Games. And now 10 years has passed, and more Chinese are practicing the Olympic sports in their real life instead of watching them only.
They do, and it has a lot to do with how the economy, how the society is changing. Of course, a lot of other questions that still need to be answered, as we mentioned earlier. Having said that, the Winter Olympic Games, China has been bidding, and now China is going to be the host, 2022. This time, though, the way people think is very different, I guess. Absolutely. Paul, how is it different, and what does it mean for China's preparation of this Winter Olympic Games? I mean, we have been there, done that, seen it, demonstrated it. So now, this time, it's going to be a different way of looking at Olympic Games.
Because China is already different from 10 years ago, and the Olympic movement has changed over the last 10 years. It's addressing the importance of sustainability instead of just grand scale extravaganza. So China is also learning from this, and China is digesting this spirit by itself, because China is also progressing from a fast expanding to more sustainable development model. And also, by hosting the Winter Olympics, China also set a target for you know, millions, if not hundreds of millions of Chinese to practice some sort of skiing or skating.
Wow, there's a goal there, but
that's
quite a challenging goal.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. But you know, how to host the Winter Games will demand much more you know, economic prowess to put it together.
Well, it's not just the money, I guess. There's a lot of more things. There are a lot of more things than just the money. Technology also. There are a lot of more than just technology and money, because technology and money wouldn't solve everything, right? Simon, what do you make of that? I mean, 10 years on, China 2022, it's a very different China. It's a very different Olympic movement.
Yeah, and it's a very different Olympic Games. Obviously, the Winter Olympics is sort of less well known than the Summer Olympics, and slightly less high profile. I don't think China will spend the 40 billion pounds it did on the previous Olympics, but still, it's a massive opportunity for China to show off what it can do. The last few Winter Olympics haven't been that great for China. I think 9 medals, 1 gold in the last one, but you've still got you know, hockey could make a big appearance. You've qualified for hockey because you're the host nation, and you know, that could be massive, because the NHL, obviously, a lot of Chinese fans in Canada watch that. So I think there's huge potential to open up all these new sports to people in China. So how many Chinese people have seen bobsleigh and, you know, things like this, the luge, and so I think, you know, there are certainly some sports that China's very good at, the speed skating, obviously. So there'll be some really exciting moments, but yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how China does.
It's going to be a very different China once again when 2022 is coming. Going to be very different from 2018, which is where we are now, right now. If you look at how the world is changing and how China is being debated by the rest of the world. Will that moment happen when the opening ceremony begins, and then everything comes to a very exciting U-turn? Professor Liu.
I do not think it's going to be as exciting as what happened 10 years ago, but that means Chinese people are getting more matured. We are shifting more from, emotional aspect, not to more rational aspect. And that means that, Chinese people have further opened their eyes, and also China has successfully, after Olympic, hosted so many global events. And, people are having more confidence in that regard. And I assume that, this really is going to be made more cost-effective from economic perspective, and also there will be equally more volunteers to participate.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's also about how sports are doing in China, not just common people practicing sports, but rather how some of the top sportsmen and women in China are performing on the international stage. We debate about the sports system a lot over the past 10 years. Is it going to happen?
Yeah, and also sports will be a very strong, very important element in the overall greater cultural industry that China is very aggressively promoting in its economic transformation, because it would attract and create more jobs and attract more demographic attention and also participation. I think in just a few years, the difference that we will see in the Winter Olympics would be more and more young Chinese would feel so familiar with the sports, the winter sports, that many of them have already tried on the slope, and they know how it feels to skate and ski. Very different from what the audience were watching archery, shooting, many of the summer games.
It was only as spectators, but this time as participants.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a great change, we hope. Best wishes for China and the rest of the world, the Sports Olympic Games. But for now, I want to thank the three of you for being with us over the past 10 years. Thank you so much. Paul Dong, Liu Baocheng, Simon Pusey. What a pleasure, gentlemen, for being with you. 10 years on since Beijing Olympic Games.
How about working together in 2022?
Well, I'm sure we've got a lot of work to do. There we go.